What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Moaa's monthly podcast, where we will be coming to you each month to share the happenings around Moaa, discuss the hot tea, share the stage with our guests, and close out with our mic drop thoughts. I'm Shatara Stokes.
I'm Jaslyn Eddings.
And I'm Devon Robb, and welcome to the Cookout.
We've got two really special guests for you today, but I want to kick us off first with a quick Moaa Minute. Another reminder to register for the symposium in June. We're looking forward to seeing all of you in person and are planning some pre-symposium events. Also, the McLinden Foundation is accepting host applications for the 23-24 McLinden Fellow cohort. If you are interested in learning more about hosting a fellow, check out minorityleaders.org.
All right, so cool. So normally, this is where we do our hot tea segment, right? And we talk about anything that's, very hot topic that's going on right now. However, with the two guests that we're about to bring on, we think it's important that the hot tea segment is going to be to share the stage as well, because this is actually a pretty hot topic. Right now we have over 1,500 student athletes that are in the transfer portal. So for today's hot tea segment, we're going to call it the Portal Madness.
That's right. We had to bring in the experts for this one. Today, we have the Senior Associate Athletic Director for Compliance and Administration at Rice University and the Vice President and Director of Athletics at Toledo University. We got Tori in Houston and Brian Blair. What's up, Moaa fam? How are you?
Doing well. Great to see you.
Good seeing y'all too.
Hey, so just really quick, let me say I am extremely excited about having these guests on here. Not only are these two amazing, highly intelligent, brothers that we have here, but on our last show, we had China Jude, the awesome ceiling breaking, game-changing China Jude on there. And she was talking about her experience at Wyoming. And she talked about a story when she walked into the meeting room and there was nothing but bald man in that meeting room. I felt a little offended. I'm not gonna lie, so I am glad
she was blessed.
Right here on today's show, we have Bald Appreciation Day. You know what I'm saying? We got the bald and the beautiful on here, So Brian and Torian, thank you, for representing the Bald brothers. I'm sure every other person that's watching this or listening to this podcast agrees that, hey, that bald man, we got to unite and stick together. So thank you, brothers, for joining us today.
Absolutely.
I love it. We upgrading around here. Bald is only.
I was like, where are you going with this? I'm dying. Okay. Thanks for coming to talk with us about everyone's favorite subject right now, the transfer portal. Let's just start this off by asking, in this era, what are the best practices for supporting current students that are in the portal?
I'll take this one. I'll say, for me, in my current role, the biggest thing I would say is making sure student athletes are educated about what the portal is. When this first came about, I had a lot of student athletes who were confused. They thought it only as a recruiting database, so they were trying to figure out how do they enter in their highlight films or how do they, put their stats into it. And so really first educating them on what this is. It's a database in order for institutions to understand where students are academically, where they are in their participation and athletic eligibility. So that's one, but then also making sure that even when they enter the portal, we're still a resource here as an athletic department. They can still come to us if they have questions, if they're trying to figure out their eligibility status, what they need to do prior to their departure from our institution before going on and seeking matriculation at the next institution. And so for me, that's a big thing that I would say about this new space with this transfer portal is, making sure that they understand that we're still here to help them and we're still here to serve them.
Yeah, I think that's huge because I just think there's a lot of confusion and misnomers and a lot of misinformation out there. And knowing some of the data behind why you're making a decision or what you're about to step into. I would say too, just in this new era, if you call it that, with not having the one-time piece and now everybody can transfer, is really doing the things that we always wanted to do from a student athlete experience, but doubling down on them. And I think relationships and letting your student athletes feel heard and seen is more important than ever. We got to listen to these student athletes. It's no longer maybe what I came up through playing a football student athlete and just, hey, I want you to be 5 minutes early, jump this high, and you're going to do it. And I'm going to do it twice as hard as you asked me to do it. I think in today's world, you really got to be intentional about listening, providing opportunities for input. You still got to lead and still make people uncomfortable to inspire growth. But I think it's really, really important that you listen and form really, really authentic relationships. These student athletes see through fake really, really easily nowadays. So if you don't come at them with some authenticity, just being a real you, then you're going to lose them faster than if you had never tried to build a relationship. So it's kind of two-pronged on that. But I think once you have that relationship and you've shown them that you care, and I think Torian does a great job of this, then you can dive into the education, and they don't see it as education or numbers that you put behind there to try to influence the decision. They see this as somebody that cares about me, just trying to make sure I've got the information that I need.
I love that. No, it goes back to the old saying of people don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And I tell folks all the time that the old school days of coaching, when it comes to, hey, they got to listen to what you say. Those days are behind us now. Now these student athletes, they want to know that you genuinely care about them, and once they know that you genuinely care about them, they'll go through a wall for you. So appreciate you both for that answer.
Yeah, and especially just thinking about holistic development and what are we offering outside of the athletic space. I think that's really important as well. How do you all see the future of transfers changing?
That's a great question. And I wish I had a crystal ball to tell you I know exactly what it looks like. I think in this landscape we're in now, where you got this convergence of transfers and NIL opportunities, they're kind of feeding off each other, right? So like the future of transfers in some ways are dependent on the future of the NIL, right? And what that looks like moving forward in the landscape on that. Because I do think that's playing into some of these equations, not all, but certainly some, that is a factor. But I think student athletes are still, it seems, making decisions based on what they think are in their best interest, whether that be personal and or quote unquote just for sport reasons, or professional. And I think we've got to find ways as an institution to understand why they're making the decisions and what we can do to influence those decisions if we do want to influence decisions. I mean, I think certain coaches and staff view it as a positive that a young person that you brought in that may not be a good fit can move on to a better opportunity to find a roster spot or play or whatever. And many coaches and staff and student athletes even don't view that as a negative. And I think sometimes the transfer portal is only mentioned as a negative. It can be a positive for you made a wrong decision or wrong turn or you're aligned with the wrong coach and you want an opportunity to play at a place or find a better experience or be coached by somebody that better fits what you wanted out of your college experience. Because these 4 years, 5 years for some, fly by. And you don't get do-overs. Like as administrators, we have a long runway. We have 10, 20 years in this business to create new experiences and do different things. But I try to remind our people all the time, if we mess up a student athlete's experience for a year, they don't get that year back. And so we need to take it that seriously. So how we treat them, I think is really important. But I think hopefully more of us start seeing it as a positive and stop associating it with as much as a negative. I think you saw it this year in the tournament and others. Like there's places that have a lot of success with the transfer portal, and it's not a negative. And student athletes are still, by and large, graduating, still being successful, still reaping the fruits of the labor that come into college athletics. So I just think how we look at it and how we view it, it'll be somewhat normalized.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Brian said, and I would also focus on the fact that like the future of transfers, where we saw this kind of explosion in this space once a lot of things were removed, barriers. So we had the portal opening up, and we saw maybe a small tick in those entering the space. So I think between 2018-19 and 2019-2020, it was somewhere where it averaged a little less than 20,000 student athletes being in the portal, and then it immediately jumped with COVID, with the removal of the one-time transfer exception. You just saw this mass jump of everybody just saying kind of a gold rush mentality piece where they assume that, oh, I got to go and get this. And, quite frankly, there were a lot of emotional decisions made in this transfer space. Students felt that, hey, like I'll not being treated fair, or assumed that they weren't being treated fair, and went for what they thought was the next best thing. And I think as time goes on and we get more data and we're able to really get to the heart of what is causing young people to seek a new home. Is it because they believe that there's the grass is greener on the other side, or did we not do the best job possible while they were here in order to ensure that they saw all the benefits that were made available to them? So I think the future of transfer, we may end up seeing less transfers, because we as administrators will be investing more in creating very meaningful experiences for the young people that we recruit, and we kind of give them the glitz and glamour part when they're coming here on their official visit. And not only do we say that and we sell that, we actually do that and we invest in that when they're here. So I think we may see less transfers in the future, because we'll be more intentional about creating those experiences that student athletes will reflect positively on, and will keep them at the institution through graduation.
Good information from you both. So I agree. It's all about that experience that we create for the student athletes. So the more greater experience they have, the more high likelihood that we can keep them here. But at the same time, too, Torian, as you mentioned, it would be interesting to see that data, what comes out within the next couple of years. I think it'd be interesting for the student athletes to see that data. I think a lot of them don't understand that there are more student athletes. There are a lot of student athletes that are currently still in the portal, that have been in the portal for quite some time. So a lot of them think that once you go in, hey, somebody's gonna come snatch you out real quick and like pump the brakes. It's not like that, So the more information that we can get out there and learn from both sides, I think would be good. So
it's kind of funny because you talk about the portal and being lost out there and just stuck out here in this mystical world of the portal. It's like another galaxy, but it really is. You can get lost out there. And there's somebody coming behind you, just like when you have a roster spot that's younger, that's bigger, that's faster, that's stronger, that's trying to take that spot. And in some ways, I'm not sure our student athletes, who oftentimes feel like they're invincible in a lot of ways, that confidence is important. But there's a reality, too, that you may not get picked up or go to the opportunity you thought you were popping in. Don't just read the headlines on ESPN and everywhere else and think that's going to be me, because it may not. And your original opportunity may have been a blessing. And so you need to value that blessing, but also know that whatever you're entering into is unknown, and a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, I was always told. So sometimes that's the case within the transfer portal too.
Yep. Definitely gotta be careful who's in your ear before you get Wally pipped. That's for sure. So next question we have for you all is the huge word that's out there right now, especially in the world of college athletics, is collectives, right? And you have a lot of schools that are affiliated with the collective. Can you please inform our listeners, our audience, on what exactly is a collective, and then provide your thoughts on collectives as well?
Yeah, I think, so it's going to mean different things to different institutions. You'll have it where I would say the most simplistic way to define it is just a booster club that's not directly affiliated with the athletic department, but meant to support the endeavors of the athletic department, specifically in the space of supporting student athletes. I don't necessarily see collectives as a negative, especially in my space in compliance, like understanding a lot of the nuances between what NCAA guidance has given us in terms of name, image, and likeness, and then also having to be up to date on Texas state law and how that governs name, image, and likeness. I think the biggest thing for us in this space is, you want to know who's involved in that space. You want to make sure that you have access in the way of knowing, okay, you know what's happening to your student athletes, because what you want to avoid is that aspect of a collective influencing decisions of the athletic department. A collective going after a particular student athlete, and they're paying that student athlete, a six-figure sum. The expectation is that that athlete is going to contribute to the athletic department. But if they're not, then, what's keeping the collective from saying, hey, coach, you need to play X athlete, or this athlete isn't contributing, what's to continue them, or should we revoke our deal? And so we want to make sure, like in this space, that we're very clear of what is pay for play and what is a fair market deal based upon somebody's name, image, and likeness. And I think right now the lines are blurred because everybody's doing it differently. The state of Ohio has a different law than the state of Texas. The state of Utah doesn't have an NIL law. So it's kind of like the wild, wild west out there. And I think until we get to a regulation that is consistent across the board, we're going to see these collectives and these groupings of individuals, popping up and trying to potentially influence student athletes without necessarily knowing the guidance and the governance. And I think that's where for us as athletic departments and as administrators, it's very key that we understand this space. We're working in this space, and we're trying to find ways to ensure that our student athletes are protected at every step.
Yeah, I mean, I think Torian knocked it out of the park. I don't have much to add. I think it's new to all of us. I think it varies by state. Again, I moved from Washington a year ago that didn't have a law. Now I'm in Ohio that's got a law that's pretty open in terms of what we can do. And there's just a lot of confusion. And I think within the collective, as you talk to the individuals involved, there's a whole lot of confusion about what we do in athletics, what they're getting involved in, why they're excited about it, what the return on investment should be, what they're giving to tax, nonprofit, profit. There's just a lot of questions. And I feel like sometimes we spend more time answering questions of collectives of how to do what they're trying to do than we do actually focused on the student athletes and providing those opportunities. Generally speaking, I mean, I think if people with capacity want to give that money to our student athletes, go for it. And in the grand scheme of the rules and everything else, I mean, if that's their passion, if that's what they want to do to our student athletes, particularly some of them that don't come from a ton of opportunity or wealth themselves, like, more power to you. I don't have an issue with that. I think to Torian's point, just to have some national understanding and a better guide of the rules, whatever they are. I mean, I'm not one of those people that says we got to do this, we got to do that. I just wish we all had the same set. And then we can start digging into what that set of rules means. Because right now you see even different compliance offices or conference offices giving different interpretations of the guidance that we've gotten. And it varies with, in a conference office, I may have 5-6 states within that footprint. And so that guidance they're given doesn't apply the same to everybody. So I think sometimes just there's confusion about why there's confusion. I see some of the talking heads on Twitter and social media saying, well, no, it's not that problem or it's not this problem. Like, I don't want to shut down anybody's opportunity. I just want to know what rules I'm playing in. If you give me the rules, I'll figure out a way to be successful. But right now, it just figures like everybody's going up to the stove to see if it's hot, and we're trying to figure out who's going to get burned. And that just didn't feel like a really good spot to be strategic in, which is something I enjoy doing.
And see, that's why I stay in my lane. I know if I go up to the stove, I'm absolutely going to get burned. And when you talk about that confusion, that is me all the way. And that's why I'm glad that we have experts in the field that know how to figure this out and navigate it. So for a majority of the media's focus in regard to NIL, it pertains to Power 5 schools. How has NIL affected student athletes at your institutions and other non-Power 5 schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating that we talk about, you see what what's covered or gets the coverage is a small subset of all of certainly Division I, but take it a step beyond that, beyond the NCAA. And it's almost like none of that matters. You just want to focus on this. And if that's the case, I just wish we would be explicit in stating that versus trying to throw everybody under one umbrella. But that's probably a separate point for a second day. But I think in terms of collectives and kind of what this all looks like on our campus at a group of 5 or non-Power 5, it's very much similar to my experience in the Pac-12 and SEC and other places where we have collectives. We have 2 of them here at Washington State. We also have unique NIL opportunities for our student athletes to engage the community, the business community. But I think the key difference that I found, besides maybe scope and scale, is when I was at a Power 5, a lot of our budget came from the TV contract. And when we were going out fundraising and asking for money or generating revenue, it was for a lot of times the nicer to have things, right? It was a nicer building, a fancier this, a fancier that. It wasn't paying for the bare minimums in many ways. I think what I see here at Toledo, I mean, big chunk of my budget comes from the institution and student fees. And so I fundraise to bring up that other piece of it. But when we're having NIL opportunities and collective opportunities, we got to be really careful that we don't color outside the lines to the point that we're cannibalizing our own revenue streams. Because then I can't go back to students and ask for more student fees or go to the president and put my hand out. I mean, I can, it wouldn't be advised, but that's the situation I'll get tossed into because I can't now pay my salaries, pay my operation costs, X, Y, and Z, because part got cannibalized to pay student athletes. Maybe ultimately that's where we're supposed to end up, but it hits different than it would at a Power 5 institution that maybe has got a little bit more security from the financial piece, and they're not leaning on the student fees and campus support as much as I am. And so that's one piece that gets lost in the narrative too, that we're so cash flush relative to our income and our revenue. And again, it's focusing on one small percentage versus the larger, where we all got unique challenges on our own campuses.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree here. And what's unique about Rice is that we don't have student fees, so we get a large support from our university through our endowment, and through that university support. And so, yeah, there isn't like another pot to go to in terms of like, hey, let's ask our students to supplement the athletic department. And we do run into that space of like, by going out and fundraising, but then also having donors and alums who are interested in this NIL space. We can't double dip, because of course, if they want to be focused in one space, or their heart is truly in this NIL collective space, then we may have to go another route, or try to ensure that we still retain on to those who have been historically supporters directly of the athletic department and our annual giving. In terms of the differences, I think Brian hit the nail on the head in terms of scale and scope, where we're seeing not necessarily the large amount of deals or the vast majority of deals. But I will say one key thing that I've seen that's very unique to specifically to my institution, but there's a few others, alignment with the actual NIL opportunity. I think a lot of our student athletes have seen this not as a monetary generator, but truly a way for them to use their platform to grow awareness on something that they care about. I'll use an example. We have a volleyball student athlete who has type 1 diabetes, and so she used that as a way to talk about her, bring awareness to that through partnership with our Houston Methodist Hospital here. And so just working through that space, she was able to talk about, how do I, bring awareness to this? How do I speak out about this? How can I serve as an ambassador in order to help support those who may be considering athletics, and say that you can be a Division I athlete, you can compete at the highest level, you can achieve great things and have great success, and also have this, and it's not seen as an ailment or as a precursor or a prohibitor from you being able to achieve great things. And I thought that was really, that was spot on in terms of being a Rice athlete and a Rice student, that they were using their voice in order to bring awareness to something that was meaningful to them. So I think with that space, I think everybody would like to make money and like to be able to support themselves here, to get off of mom and dad's payroll from time to time, even though you may end up calling them to help out. But I think it's a way for our young people to find themselves in unique ways where branding opportunities, ambassadorships, things that they truly care about, and be able to leverage that long term beyond their time as student athletes.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that real quick, because some people don't know this, but I used to work where Torian works at Rice University. I sat in that chair in that office that he's in right now. And I think what I noticed when I was there and working in a compliance role as part of my duties is how often I tell student athletes no, they couldn't do certain things to chase their entrepreneurial dreams. And I remember a football student athlete time and time again coming to my office, and I want to do this, I want to brand this, I want to get into business, I want to start a business. And at the time, the NCAA rules didn't allow for that. And so we talk about NIL, and I think it takes a negative tone sometimes. But I remember at Rice, like the opportunities and the conversations I had with those young people, I could count maybe a dozen different times that I tell somebody no, they couldn't do something, where now they can. And it was in line with the university's mission of preparing them for life after, and maybe they were engineers, or they had patented a product, or they had done some other things. And so that's the positive of NIL. It allows those individuals to get started way sooner. I think entrepreneurship is at an all-time high in terms of interest. I think you got students interested in being influencers and the like. And we saw a lot of that at Rice, especially during my time there. And the rules have allowed them to be expressive and kind of prepare for that life after college, but build on the platform they have during these 4 or 5 years. And I think we missed a lot of opportunities, and I feel bad for those student athletes actually missed those opportunities when they were there that now they can take advantage of.
Absolutely. I appreciate you all highlighting kind of like non-traditional NIL opportunities. We also had some student athletes who did like a streaming night and then donated the proceeds to the Ronald McDonald House. So it's been interesting to be able to get to know student athletes and their personalities and the things that, the causes they care about through the NIL space. So when the common sports fan discusses NIL and the transfer portal, they're normally referring to football, men's and women's basketball student athletes. Can you all give some insight on how NIL and the transfer portal has affected other sports, maybe especially Olympic sports that don't get as much media coverage?
Yeah, I think that's a great way for some of those sports that aren't normally highlighted as much in the media space to those student athletes be brought to the forefront and be able to leverage that. I think about the young lady who's at LSU, the gymnast, I believe it's Olivia Dunn, who she's using her platform in that space in order to grow. And I believe she might be, if not the highest, close to the highest in terms of compensation because of NIL, because of that space, and because of that platform. So I think for those Olympic sports, this is a great way for them, because they don't have, when you're competing as a track and field athlete like myself, or as a swimmer or tennis player, you don't have your name on the back of your jersey, or you don't have your name, but this is an opportunity to do so. This is your chance in order for people to know your name and get that out there. And so I'm really excited for this space to continue to grow, specifically for our Olympic sport athletes. I think that we'll continue to see those opportunities. And even with the transfer portal as well, it's, they may, have a really great, and successful, opportunity at one institution, and, whether they graduate or choose to transfer as an undergraduate, now they can choose to leverage that even more at that next institution if they have that ability. I see a lot of athletic departments investing in these spaces because they know that student athletes are keeping tabs on how are you going to help me grow my brand. And I think a lot of times people get that confused with it's about team, but selfishly there is this self-interest that student athletes are invested in. And if we can help them and also help us as well, because we're bringing those top athletes to our institution, I see nothing wrong with that. And I think it's only going to continue to grow. And I think we as administrators need to be aware of that. And we need to find ways to say, we may not be able to do it like the Power 5 institutions out there, but if we have a space, or we have that as a thought in mind in terms of the student athlete development space and how we grow young people, I think that's going to be key in order to ensure that they feel supported and they feel that we are invested in their growth beyond their time as student athletes.
Yeah, I divide NIL in my mind in kind of two different fashions: one the collective fashion, one the traditional business dealings and or brand building. And I think the Olympic sport athletes, some have success on the collective front, but by and large, a lot of that effort's going to go into the traditional. I'm the face of, I'm endorsing, or I'm the brand I'm representative of. And I think there's a ton of opportunity there for those athletes to take advantage of now. And honestly, I've seen more of the Olympic sport athletes excel at that part of it than I have in the football and basketball. I think they've shown a keen, creative way of tapping into it. We had a volleyball student athlete here that was viral all the time on TikTok. Like, that was her thing. She had more followers than anybody else on this entire campus. Like, we would have her retweet the department stuff or repost it to try to tap into some of that clout. And she just had a personality that people vibed with. They like hearing what she did. She was creative. She was funny. It allowed her to express herself. And really tapping those resources to segue to when she's not a student athlete, what does that look like? Because for many of our sports, they don't have those professional opportunities at the same level. So I think it's a gateway for better outcomes post college. And it's a huge part of education in general, right? I mean, we all as professionals brand ourselves and become who we are and position ourselves. I mean, Devon's not wearing that pocket square for nothing. He's branding himself, and he's careful about how he looks and how he appears in this moment and what that looks like. And so we all do it. And so to say, well, now you're a student athlete, you're selfish because you're on a team. Well, we're all parts of teams, but we always want to brand ourselves and carry ourselves appropriate. And I think NIL is a great opportunity for those athletes that may get less shine to capitalize on that.
This is coming from the man that was once known as the world's strongest compliance administrator.
Like I said, we all brand ourselves. You gotta cut through the noise.
You both spoke about how the portal has given athletes that may necessarily not have gotten their name out there a chance to get their name out there. We've also saw it in this past men's basketball tournament where we saw the Final Four that we did not think we would see. And so with those upsets, as people are calling them, what are your thoughts? Do you believe that it is due to the transfer portal that we saw, the 4 teams that we saw? Well, 3 of them.
I do. I think, having been here in Houston, having seen it up close, it was quite amazing, to look at those teams, and it's not the traditional blue bloods that we normally see. I think it's a combination, one of NIL and then also of the NCAA's additional year that granted in COVID. You see, a lot of student athletes who were competing in their 5th year of eligibility, being able, and I think it's a culmination of our own work. Like we, encourage student athletes to come in the summers and take summer school classes. And so they're matriculating through the school system faster. And so, by the end of 3 years, they have, 2 years of eligibility left. And, in some instances, student athletes would either forego that or wouldn't pursue that. But now, like, opportunities for graduate degrees and opportunities to go on and continue playing in this much larger space. I think it's a direct correlation to what we've seen with NIL and being able to offer student athletes compensation for their name, image, and likeness, and also the fact of, because of out of the pandemic, this opportunity for student athletes to do the, we can't repeat the year, but we can add something, try to get you more opportunities on the back end, and we saw it play out, and it was truly amazing to see when you're thinking about, Florida Atlantic University, San Diego State, 2 institutions in Miami, to some extent, even a Power 5, but not a traditional basketball powerhouse. You're seeing them in there with the likes of UConn, and even though UConn came out on top, nobody is going to discredit any of the other 3 teams who were there and say that they didn't deserve to be there, or it was a lucky way, a path towards the Final Four. They truly earned it. They deserve to be there. And I think it's a testament to what we will continue to see is you're going to see more Cinderellas ended up at at that final dance and ready to square off against those who have traditionally been the ones who've been hosting the trophy at the end of that one shining moment.
Yeah, I agree with Torian on the kind of how this talent spread out via the portal and via the pandemic related extra year. I think even when that year kind of, those student athletes for that year kind of subside or they finish their eligibility, I still think you're going to see talent spread out because the portal doesn't keep you locked in on the roster until graduation anymore. If you're not playing and you want to move on, you can. And so I think that'll lead to more opportunities in more places and more teams that maybe you hadn't heard of. Hopefully it happened in basketball. Hopefully it happens in football too, even more so. When I was at Washington State, we had a position, their whole focus was transfer portal. I think we were the first football program in America to announce that position. And we hired an individual, and all they did was evaluate the portal and evaluate possible transfers. And now you're seeing almost every staff, if not many, had that position that's now focused on the transfer piece. So you recruit a certain amount of high school, you recruit a certain amount of transfer, and you bring up your roster. I know some people described it as free agency versus the draft, and you kind of the draft of the high school kids. The free agency is more plugging holes and plugging immediate needs, and maybe that's one way of looking at it. I think you've seen some teams go all in on transfers. Well, that kind of handicaps you for the future unless you're always committed to going transfers, and vice versa. Some others want to get high school young people because they feel like they can get people with a higher ceiling and grow them versus the transfer may be somewhat of a more finished product. So I think coaches have to be smart in playing that game and understand it. And also, I mean, you can get stuck in the transfer portal in terms of coaches going in there and pulling the athlete out, and then they get on your campus and they're a problem. Or they're bad for the culture, they're bad in the locker room, they're bad for the environment, or they don't respond to your coaching. And I've seen that really good coaches get tripped up of getting what they thought was the great answer. And then they get them like, oh, I didn't spend as much time recruiting this transfer and along with them, their parents or coaches, as I would if they were coming out of high school. And I made a mistake. And now I'm stuck with them because they can't transfer again. So they transferred at one time and they're on the roster and they got protected rights via the student athlete. And so I think there's just a whole lot to learn for coaches and administrators alike in terms of navigating this transfer portal and being successful. But those that tap into it and grow and learn with it will be the ones that you see in the NCAA tournament move forward, the college football playoff, the like really excelling.
So you both are former student athletes. So instead of transferring to a different school, if you could transfer to a different sport, which sport would it be and why?
We do pickleball. Is that an option? I think that's my new favorite thing right now. And trying to pick that up. I love it. I would powerlifting is not an official sport, so I couldn't do that. I'd say wrestling. That was my best sport in high school. And if I had to go back and do it all over again, and I didn't have a chance to play football, it'd been wrestling.
Yeah, I would say for me, it'd be lacrosse. And selfishly, like I played in high school, but I was pretty much the guy who just covered the crease. Anything that came across, coach just told me to just you see the other color, you hit the other color, and I was like, cool, no problem, I can do that pretty well. But if had invested more time into developing the skill, definitely would have played in. And also just selfishly, I see some of the foreign tours they get to go on when I was back. I'm kind of jealous that I haven't gone across or anything. Like they didn't do much of that in track at ECU, but no knock against my alma mater.
You know what, Torian, I'm loving that because I tell folks all the time that I will play lacrosse as well. And then I told them, like, I'll be like the Mighty Ducks Bash Brothers, so you and I can be the Bash Brothers together. You know what I'm saying? Hey, I'm not trying to score. I just want to hit somebody and lay somebody out. That's all I was looking to do. For the last question we have for both of you, so Brian, you mentioned earlier about, everybody brands themselves, right? And you mentioned my pocket square, so if there is anybody out there who would like to sponsor my pocket squares, let me know. I'll be all for it. But Brian, one of the things that you do a lot on social media is you highlight your cooking skills, especially when it comes to barbecuing, so of course we can't have you on welcome to the cookout without asking you a question about barbecuing, so let's say, if you're coming to the cookout, what would be the one dish that you would want to bring and highlight to everyone? And then Torian, along those same lines for you, I don't know, if you get down behind the grill as well, so if you do, what will be that one dish that you want to bring? Or for people like me, what would be that one dish that you look forward to eating when you go to the cookout?
Yeah, I grew up in South Carolina, so I got to come with the ribs. That's my go-to. I like brisket, I like pulled pork, I like all that. I'm gonna smoke them, but I got to do the ribs. But I just love, like, even more so than eating it, I love having people over and that genuine happiness. I feel like with some music, with the grill going, with everybody being around each other, that just brings people together. When I can host people like that, I try to do it at my house or other events. Just the happiness it brings to people is something that I've always enjoyed. My family owns a restaurant. If I had to do something else, I'd probably own a food truck or a restaurant myself, just as I love the happiness it brings to people. But definitely coming with the ribs and lay it down. Get everybody with the barbecue sauce and everything else. We get it nice.
Oh yeah, like I look, I just show up to B Blair's Twitter sometimes just to look at the pictures. I'm like, oh yeah, this is I'm retweeting, double whatever I can do. I'm like, I'm ready for it. So it's funny. So Brian talks about being from South Carolina. I'm originally from right outside of DC, but family is from North Carolina. So they got, while pulled pork is big thing, big thing for my family is fish fry. And so for me, I'm gonna be outside frying fish. And just like Brian said, it's about the community. It's about gathering people. My family talks about, like, you get everybody out on the porch and you just porch stalking. You just sitting on the porch. You just watching people go up and down the dirt road all day, and you frying fish. And you want somebody to come over there, get a piece of white bread, get some mustard, get some coleslaw, and that's how you start a conversation. Breaking bread with people is big, and I've always looked at it as, for as much as people highlight differences, if you can find similarities, like, nobody's gonna turn down a hot piece of fish, and if they are, I don't know what's wrong with them. So I think from that end, that's big for me. When that's a way that my family loves on people, is to feed them and make sure that they can embrace them, and that's what I try to do with people. Try to embrace them in a way that I only know how, which is just through food.
Man, I skipped lunch today. I've been running around. Y'all got me ready to throw down.
Now listen, Torian, I don't know about the white bread with the mustard on the fish. I thought you were gonna say hot sauce. I was with you.
You can do hot sauce. Like, it's look, it's whatever floats your boat. We got variety out here.
Everything you all described is why we wanted to call this Welcome to the Cookout. It's about a community. And so that's a perfect way to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Brian and Torian, for joining us today. We appreciate all the gems that you shared, and we hope you did have a little bit of fun. Everybody tune in next month where we're going to focus on mental health awareness, and the topic is going to be burnout.
All right, so next up for our next segment, is the last segment of the show. As you all know how we always do, it's the mic drop thoughts. All right, so we have the amazing Torian who's staying on here for us because he has some thoughts he wants to share with you all. So since he's our esteemed guest, we'll kick it off to him first. All right, so Torian, what you got for us?
Yeah, I would say for me, what's on my mind or what's just thinking about, it's kind of the tail end after watching both the men's and being a part of the men's and the women's basketball tournament is just the coverage of the women's basketball tournament, like the amazing young women that competed and the attention that it drew, and just always thinking about like where we are now, 50 years from the introduction of Title IX, and how far women's sports have come, but still have a long way to go. So we're not done yet. But just realizing the attention that was on the sport that the young ladies deserved in this space, and really what it allowed them to do now, and what it will continue to allow us to do moving forward in this space, not just for women's basketball, but for all women's sports, to really grow that space, to invest in that space appropriately, and so that women will continue to have equitable opportunities for participation like men, and we'll continue to just invest in this space, and there won't be a time where we can look back and say, oh, I remember when this wasn't in place. It would only be when, okay, look how far we've continued to grow in this space.
I agree. I love it. Definitely looking forward to seeing how things go. And I saw something the other day for Iowa, where they're saying they had to pause their season ticket sales for next year because right now the request for it is just out of this mind blowing right now. So
you got to raise the fees, man.
Good stuff. All right, who's up next? Josh, Shatara, who wants to go?
I can go, but it's not going to be as positive as Torian. I would like to just rant about my allergies, and that the pollen count was high since February. It came early this year, and I just don't think it's fair. I know there are other people out there with the seasonal allergies. Hopefully it's over soon for us. But then on top of that, I'm also realizing I might have like some undiagnosed sensory processing disorder, because I'm tired of hearing people's bodily fluids. I'm tired of hearing people sniffle, sneeze, cough, snot, and all of it. I don't want to hear it anymore. It's driving me insane. And lastly, if you are a scream sneezer, I absolutely hate you. That is all. I can't do it anymore, guys. I can't. It has to end.
I don't have a great mic drop thought today, but I am thinking about lunch, which is now turning into 4 o'clock early dinner. And I'm just wondering if people prefer Qdoba over Chipotle, because I think I prefer Chipotle, and I'm just curious what everybody else likes.
There's going to be a poll up now on this episode to find out. But I agree with you, Chipotle.
Yeah, I'll go with Chipotle, especially since they now have queso. Now, before they had quesos, might have been a toss-up, but since they have queso now, I'm a Chipotle guy.
So Chipotle has this honey vinaigrette that if you don't get it, you're doing yourself a disservice. That's all I'm saying.
Torian, what are your thoughts? You got to...
I just want my food hot. I'll be honest. I just want my food hot. I'll say my preference is for Chipotle for sure. But if I see a Qdoba and I'm driving by, or Moe's, and I'm like, you know what, I'm hungry, and it look like the line is going, I'm gonna jump in, because I'm not gonna be too proud by any means.
I'm adding Moe's to the poll because people be sleeping on Moe's, and Moe's is good.
Awesome. That's hilarious. So for me, my mic drop thought is definitely want to extend a huge thank you to Torian and B. Blair for joining our podcast today. When it comes to the transfer portal and NIL, you have folks that are on both sides of the coin. Some folks are for it, some folks are against it. but one of the things that sometimes sticks out to me is when people often say, well, it's getting away from the original intent of college athletics. And sometimes to me, that can sound like, well, this is how we've always done things. And I'm not a big fan of that statement. So I just think we all have to be adaptable to change, because this is how we've always done things. It's something that's attached to a lot that's going on in society today, and a lot, so we all have to look at how do we adapt to change, and when we are creating change, who is that change for, especially when it's benefiting those who really haven't had a lot of assistance or support in the past, so let's all be open-minded to that. Yes, and sometimes it might make it harder for you, but at the same time too, now you just gotta look at, hey, especially for us like athletes, we got to compete more. So hey, how do we just look at things, doing things differently, and find a new way to get it done, so that's my thought, and look forward to seeing how these changes continue to make things better for everyone else. Yeah. All right, folks, well, hey, thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. Like I say, thanks again to Torian, thanks again to Brian Blair. We're excited about next month's show. It's going to be awesome and amazing as always, and enjoy this beautiful weather that's outside, no matter where you are, and see you next time.
Bye.
Have a good one.